Hello, everyone. Good morning. Again, checking that we are good, and we are. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Today is April 29th, and it's the day after the first Qualitative Data Analysis Masterclass. It went very well. I'm very excited to say that I got some really positive feedback and learned some things that I will definitely apply for the fall when I launch a bigger course that will have definitely a lot more meat to qualitative methods and different things and different aspects of qualitative research. But it feels good. It really feels. I love what I do, and I think it came across yesterday in the class and with the people that were there live. I got a question at the end of the masterclass, and it was about qualitative research during a pandemic. And I did direct the person and everyone who was watching live. Redirect them and directed them at that point to many resources that I have written and posted on the blog. I also mentioned the Photo Voice Worldwide, some of their blog posts and free webinars as well. And all of those things have, I think, been wonderful and covered a lot of ground. However, I will say that once we finished and I wasn't live anymore, I started thinking, like, I really put my critical thinking hat and I started reflecting a bit more on the question. And the question I had from a participant yesterday was, have you noticed a change, perhaps a decline in qualitative research participants since the pandemic? Any difficulty in acquiring participants? I know this is a very broad question and likely varies among types of participants. So, any insights appreciated there. And it's interesting because, like, if you know me, you know that I tend to go with the everything is figure outable, which doesn't come from me. It's Mary Forleo's book and something that comes from her. And I try to have this positive outlook and look at opportunities in adversities. However, that doesn't really reduce the stress and the limitations that COVID-19 are posing in our lives and in our research. So by not addressing that, I don't do any of you any service. And that's why my coming here, my live here today, is really looking more at what might be the things that we cannot change when it comes to qualitative research during a pandemic. And some of the implications, even though they are figure outable, they really mean changing the direction of possible of qualitative research projects. So that question already had described what I think. Like, it's a broad question. It will depend on participants. I think it also depends on the setting and the approach to the research. So let's talk about participants first. If you think about the current situation, I can see how migrating a qualitative research project online might be easier and more feasible if you are planning to engage participants that are used to the online world already, and especially if they are not minors, of course, if they are not children. So if you're planning to talk to youth, and when I say youth, those who are already over 16 or 18, if you are talking about university life and any aspects of that, I think you will easily transition a project to the online space. So if you're talking to people who are used to now having their classes, their chats with friends, using different online mediums, I think it will more likely for you to not have problems recruiting and getting the engagement you need for a successful qualitative research project. However, we need to think about those who might not be doing research with an age group that can really jump online and do their research. And you can think about the two extremes. I had a discussion about a potential project with elementary school children. You can imagine how that will be likely and very much affected by COVID-19. Of course, any project that is working with school children, it kind of pauses because of summer, and that time is coming up soon. But even before and even in the fall, we don't really know how things will be. So there is a lot of uncertainty if you're really having that to do that pre-planning for something that you really don't know how it's going to be. And I think that is going to be challenging. So working with school-age children or preschoolers, any work that involves that will have a lot of uncertainty. And right now, I feel that it will be almost impossible to make any firm decisions for the next few months. Now, the other group that would also be difficult, and I say that, but I'm not sure. I might be completely wrong, but I think if you're also doing research with seniors, you would have a hard time transitioning to an online space. With that being said, there is the good old telephone survey that happened in the past, and a good old telephone interview can still happen. So I think many of us are already jumping to Zoom and Skype and thinking about a lot of the newer technologies. But depending on who your research participants are, telephone interviews might be the most appropriate. So don't complicate with anything that requires the internet. We really don't know even what the level of comfort would be for them. So those things about participants will really vary so much, and it will be something to take into account as you're moving forward. And I think the other piece is I've heard a lot of people in the online space, especially with people who offer online courses, say that they really feel that engagement in their Facebook communities and Facebook groups has increased, and people are posting more thoughtful insights. And for some groups, I think that might be happening. On the other side of that, if you think about working parents that are now also homeschooling or providing childcare, they are really running themselves very thin and on fumes. I have many friends in that situation, and I have two young kids at home. I know how my hours of work are very limited. And I wonder when I was squeezing participating in a research project if I was being invited to participate at this point. So, what do I think would happen? You would get participants that are really eager to participate because they are very involved in whatever social phenomenon or topic you're investigating. But it's very possible that the numbers would be lower just because there are so many hours in the day. And if you're homeschooling, being a parent, and working and doing everything else that maybe you didn't do by yourself before, it will be harder to engage in research. I think what that means, going back to my everything is figure outable strategy and how I try to kind of like go with that when I think about problems. With that being said, I think if you really don't want your research to suffer greatly, you will need to be more flexible and really ask that open ended question to your participant when you're approaching them. to participate in any research, what would work best for you? How do you want us to schedule whatever you want to schedule with them? If you have that in place, or if that is a possibility, I think it's more likely for you to get proper engagement, if that makes sense. And when I say proper engagement, the desired engagement, or the engagement you want, or once you want to strive for. Okay. Something else that comes to mind is really participatory approaches. If we're talking about community-based participatory approaches, I think there is a layer that is really added when you cannot do things in person. And in-person meetings where tea, coffee, and snacks are offered are so important in creating a sense of collaboration and community. And when you're trying to move that to the online space, you lose something. I think that's undeniable. However, you may gain something with people's maybe comfort level increasing, people who would not voice their opinions and thoughts feeling more comfortable and likely to do so. One thing that I think all of us need to keep in mind is that it will take probably more time to get to a level where people feel that sense of community if they are not meeting in person and seeing each other in person. I think it's possible, but it will be more challenging. In terms of recruitment in itself, I think one of the questions there was, do you think there will be a decline in research participation or in the number of research participants? I think research that is being planned or is supposed to take place with vulnerable groups, and by that I mean seniors, pregnant women, um, any other health condition that places them in that vulnerable category to contract COVID-19, I think that type of research would likely be harder at this point. And maybe I can't really say, maybe in the next year or a couple of years as well. Hard to predict, but something that I would consider would be an alternative way of conducting that research, and alternative methods of data collection, of collecting participants' reflections, so on and so forth. Like they can think about many ways besides the online, like encouraging journaling, encouraging them to audio record and provide you with those audio recordings. But in person, I think there will be definitely a decrease in interest and even participation. Now, with that being said, there are two things. And again, I have a blog post, I think it's part 4. I'm quite sure it is part 4 of the qualitative research during a pandemic, that you can go back to and refer to when thinking about your own qualitative research. And um, that particular blog post talks about institutional review boards. So your ethics approval to do certain things. Excuse me. You might be in a situation where you're trying these things out, and if you are doing something and your ethics board is on board with trying a couple of strategies, I think it will be easier to experiment and see what might work best for your research. The two things that I wanted to mention that I feel it's worth seeing where your ethics board or your IRB would be is the use of Facebook ads to recruit participants. I do also have a blog post about that was written by my friend Laura Grams, and she used Facebook ads to recruit women, was very successful. She didn't have a qualitative research project though, so I want to make that very clear. I have a couple of people now that we are working together to set up ads for their research, and they will be doing a survey, a questionnaire, but having a question at the end: would you be willing to be contacted for an interview? And I am curious to see what will happen with that. And I will report back once that project moves forward. I think for certain groups, the interest might really be there, and we might actually be surprised with the numbers we will get. Again, it will really require us to do that back and forth between design and execution and seeing what is working and not working. In that sense, it will be a lot less smooth sailing once you start collecting your data and you have gotten the number of participants that you were striving to get. So Facebook ads might be a possibility for mitigating some of the issues we'll have with people even like looking at a research poster as they are walking on campus or as they are inside a coffee shop or a class. That won't happen, right? Or less likely to happen in the time being. And the other thing that I have commented before, and I think it's something that we cannot avoid discussing, is the incentives. I do think that people should be reimbursed for their time, the time that they are spending and dedicating to your research. And that has been really something that people who do qualitative research for like consumer and marketing research, they have talked about that and emphasized how important it is to honor people's time, especially now that we know they might be struggling financially. If you have the budget and the ethics approval to reimburse participants, please do. It's first of all, I personally feel that's the ethical thing to do. And second, just because you're not traveling and coming to a physical place, it does not decrease the fact that they are giving you their time. And they are giving you their time when things are stressful, when managing anxiety is not always easy. I think I can say that it hasn't been easy for most of us. And honoring that effort to participate in something that is beyond what is happening now with the pandemic is very important. And don't really try to save those dollars. That basically, that's my opinion. Said it. Don't try to save money with not giving incentives. If you had the budget, if you were planning to give incentives, keep those incentives in place. They might be grocery store cards. That's what I always offered. If you're not seeing people in person and you want to give something that they can use online, it might be Amazon gift cards. I think it also depends on what you have done in the past and what your ethics board is on board with allowing you to do. Last but not least is again the flip side, like the positive side. There is one thing that I have realized with a few people that I have discussed: the whole transition to telephone interviews or online focus groups is the reach. So, what am I saying with that? Many people have to set where they will do their recruitment, and many of them are often limited by time and travel. And because of travel, like there is the budget restrictions for how much traveling they can do or reimburse participants for traveling. So if that is actually eliminated from the equation, you might be able to expand who you will be trying to recruit for your research. So you might also be able to balance that decline in people who might be able to participate, but the increase in the numbers of people who can be invited, because geographical area is not as much of a factor anymore. And I think that's interesting, and it's something to really see. And I think it will depend on what research you're conducting and who your participants are, the topic, their age group, and everything that we already discussed. But those are definitely things to consider, and I think things that will play a big like play a big role in what happens to qualitative research projects. So, in closing, I unfortunately don't have any good predictions that I would be saying or betting my money that will happen. It's too early. It's too early to tell, right? And it's something that we'll have to analyze case by case and adjust and pivot and change direction as needed. If you have a research project coming up in the next year and you really have a setting that is important, so you really needed it to happen inside a health institution, a hospital or a clinic or a school or a daycare, I would really be thinking about what would be the alternative if I have to change the scope of my project. And going back to Mary Forleo, I do think everything is figure outable. However, it doesn't mean that it will be a figure outable strategy doing the exact same thing. I think that will be a bit of a shift that will be required in many situations. And we'll need to learn as we go. I think we'll learn a lot, and I think qualitative research will change in so many ways. It's exciting, but scary at the same time. So I hope you found today helpful. And if you watch this and you have any comments or anything that you would like to share, please let me know. And for the person who asked that question, I hope this actually meets a bit of what the curiosity and what you were thinking. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Take care. Bye, everyone.